The flash of steel was all that separated Jasper from death as the assassin's blade missed his throat by millimeters. He twisted, using the attacker's momentum against him, and slammed the man into the polished metal wall of the council chamber. Blood pounded in his ears as screams erupted around them. Through the chaos, his eyes locked with Hermione's, her sapphire skin pale with shock but her gaze steady. In that fraction of a second, understanding passed between them. This wasn't a random attack. This was the culmination of a betrayal months in the making. The assassin recovered quickly, too quickly. Another blade appeared in his left hand. As he lunged forward again, Jasper felt the burning slice across his ribs, but didn't falter. Years of combat training had taught him that hesitation meant death. He caught the attacker's wrist, twisted hard until bones cracked, and drove his knee into the man's solar plexus. The assassin doubled over. Gasping, Jasper finished him with a precise strike to the temple that sent him crumbling to the floor. Only then did he allow himself to feel the pain blooming across his side. Warm blood seeped through his torn uniform, staining the expensive fabric a dark crimson. Council members were shouting, security personnel flooding the chamber. But Jasper's focus remained solely on Hermione. He staggered back to her side, scanning continuously for additional threats. "Are you injured?" he asked, his voice tight with pain. Hermione shook her head, her violet eyes never leaving his face. "You're bleeding," she said, her melodic voice strained with something he hadn't heard from her before, concern. "It's nothing," Jasper replied, though they both knew it was a lie. The wound burned like fire, each breath sending fresh waves of agony through his body. But as the adrenaline ebbed and the room began to swim before his eyes, Jasper knew this was only the beginning. The real battle for Flood Maris was just starting. Across the chamber, another figure rose, one of the council members whose loyalty Jasper had questioned from the start. The man's hand moved towards something concealed beneath his formal robes. Jasper tensed, preparing to move despite his injury, but Hermione was faster. With a fluid grace that belied her tall frame, she drew a slim dagger from her sleeve and threw it in one continuous motion. The blade struck true, embedding itself in the council member's shoulder. He fell back with a cry of pain, his hidden weapon clattering to the floor. "Secure the chamber," Hermione commanded, her voice cutting through the chaos. "No one leaves until I give the order." Loyal security forces moved to comply, though Jasper noted the hesitation among some, uncertain whose authority to follow in the wake of such unprecedented violence. The seeds of doubt Carrick had planted ran deep, and Jasper realized their victory here was far from assured. As darkness threatened the edges of his vision, Jasper forced himself to stand straight, to project strength despite his wounds. In this moment of crisis, appearances mattered almost as much as actions. The conspirators would be watching for any sign of weakness. "We need to address the full station," he managed to say to Hermione, his voice low enough that only she could hear, "before Carrick's people can spread their version of events." Hermione nodded once, decisively. "First, we secure this room. Then we broadcast the truth with evidence no one can dispute." As emergency medical personnel approached, Jasper allowed himself one small concession to his injury, leaning slightly against the council table for support, but his eyes never stopped Scanning, his mind never stopped. Analyzing, the Clear's throat assassin had been skilled military trained, possibly former special operations. The attack had been timed precisely, coordinated with accomplices in the council. This was not a hasty plan, but something years in the making, and they had only just begun to unravel it. 72 hours earlier, Jasper had stood in Hermione's private quarters aboard the massive space station, his attention caught by something out of place. The Flood Station was a marvel of engineering, a sprawling complex of interconnected modules orbiting the gas giant Theosur, home to over 80,000 permanent residents and a transient population 3 times that number. It served as the primary trading hub for 7 star systems. At its heart lay the administrative section where the station's most influential residents, including Hermione, maintained their private quarters. Rare interstellar trading coins worth more than what most people earned in a decade sat casually scattered across her obsidian desk. The coins gleamed in the ambient light, their exotic metals and intricate engravings marking them as items from distant worlds. Beside them lay trade agreements with the My-Horrid Consortium, documents so confidential that merely glancing at them without clearance was a capital offense in 3 systems. The blue holographic seal of the consortium pulsed gently, indicating their authenticated status. Jasper's military training kicked in immediately. He scanned the room methodically, checking for signs of intrusion or struggle. The quarters were immaculate. As always, Hermione maintained a level of order that bordered on obsessive. The air carried the faint scent of the strange flowers she favored, imported at great expense from her home world. Nothing seemed disturbed except for those items so conspicuously left in the open. Finding no evidence of forced entry, he moved to verify the security of the entrance, testing the locks and alarm systems. The biometric scanner responded properly to his authorized touch, confirming that no one had tampered with it. Something didn't add up. Hermione, the most meticulous and security-conscious trader in the quadrant, would never leave such valuables exposed. He examined the room's perimeter more carefully, looking for signs of surveillance devices. The hairs on the back of his neck stood up, an instinct honed through years of combat that had saved his life. More times than he could count, someone was watching, and he was meant to find these items. The question was why? Security to Lady Hermione's quarters. Routine check. He spoke into his comm unit, keeping his voice neutral. All clear, but requesting a standard parameter sweep. Standard protocol would bring a team to scan for electronic intrusion or surveillance, a precaution that would seem normal to anyone monitoring his actions, but it would also serve as documentation that he had discovered the items and responded appropriately without touching or removing anything. What Jasper couldn't see were the hidden surveillance nodes embedded in the ceiling panels. Behind them, in a secure monitoring room 3 levels below, Hermione watched the feat with intense interest, her slender blue fingers tapping thoughtfully against her knee. In her 15 years as head of the Floodmari's trading consortium, she had never seen a bodyguard react quite this way to her test. Most new hires, when faced with such temptation and apparent opportunity, would pocket something small, thinking it wouldn't be missed. Others would awkwardly attempt to secure the items hoping to curry favor with their new employer. Some had even stolen everything, thinking they could escape the station before the theft was discovered. This human, however, was different. He treated the situation as a potential security breach rather than an opportunity for personal gain. Fascinating, she murmured to herself, her melodic accent lilting over the word. Perhaps the personnel director was right about this one. She leaned closer to the monitor, studying the human's movements. There was an economy to them, a precision that spoke of extensive military training. His personnel file had mentioned service Earth's orbital defense force, but the details were suspiciously sparse. 8 years of service followed by a dishonorable discharge under circumstances classified by Earth authorities. After that, 4 years as a private security contractor in the outer colonies with commendations from several high-profile clients. Hermione had hired him anyway, intrigued by the recommendations and the quiet confidence he exuded during the interview. Now, watching him methodically secure her quarters without disturbing a single item on her desk, she felt a flutter of something rare, hope that finally, after a string of disappointments, she might have found someone genuinely trustworthy. Continue monitoring him, she instructed her security chief, an older male of her species named Lorath. I want to know everything he does for the next 24 hours. Lorath nodded, his expression neutral, though his eyes betrayed concern. Is this wise, Lady Hermione? This level of scrutiny for a new hire is necessary given recent events, she interrupted firmly. Someone in my inner circle is working against me, Lorath. I need to know who I can trust. The security chief bowed slightly, knowing better than to argue. As you wish, Lady Hermione. As she left the monitoring station, Hermione felt the familiar weight of isolation settle over her. 15 years at the helm of the largest trading consortium in the sector had taught her bitter lessons about trust. In her position, allies were plentiful, but friends were rare. Loyalty, when it existed at all, was typically bought rather than earned. It was a lonely existence, but one she had long since accepted as the cost of power. This human, though Jasper had shown something unusual, integrity, perhaps, or at least professional ethics. It wasn't friendship or loyalty, but it was a start, and in her increasingly precarious position, she needed all the allies she could find. The next morning, Jasper received a summons to Hermione's office. The message was tour, immediate attendance required. As he traversed the administrative level, he noted the difference shown to him by station personnel, not for himself but for the authority his position represented. As Hermione's personal bodyguard, he was an extension of her power, and on Floodmari's power was the universal currency. He entered the spacious chamber with its panoramic view of the swirling nebula beyond the station. The morning light from the nearby star cast the room in a warm golden glow, highlighting the luxurious appointments that befitted Hermione's status. The office was a statement of power, from the rare materials used in its construction to the priceless artifacts displayed with casual confidence. Hermione didn't look up from the holographic projections hovering before her. The morning light from the nearby star cast her blue skin in an almost luminescent glow, highlighting the delicate ridges along her temples that marked her as a member of the ruling caste of her species. Her long, slender fingers manipulated the data, displays with practiced ease, rearranging complex financial models with small, precise gestures. You've been in my service for exactly 16 days, Jasper, she said without preamble, her voice carrying the distinctive harmonic overtones of her species. Tell me, did you notice anything unusual in my quarters? Yesterday, Jasper stood at perfect attention, his face impassive. 6 years in Earth's military and 4 more as a private security contractor had taught him to reveal nothing, especially when being assessed. And this was definitely an assessment. Yes, Lady Hermione, there were valuable items left unsecured on your desk, and yet you didn't touch them. It wasn't a question, they weren't my property to touch. Lady Hermione, her violet eyes finally lifted to meet his. They were unnervingly perceptive, seeming to look through rather than at him. Most would have. I'm not most people. A smile flickered across her indigo lips. Clearly, she rose from her chair in one fluid motion, her height impressive even for her species. Standing nearly 7 feet tall, she towered over Jasper, who was himself not a small man. I'm traveling to the Merhorod system tomorrow, the trading summit. There requires my presence. You'll accompany me as head of security. Jasper nodded once sharply. As you wish. Tell me, Earthman, why did you leave your home world to work for aliens? The question was abrupt, designed to throw him off balance. Memories flashed through Jasper's mind, the aftermath of the Jakarta orbital collapse, the cover-up, his refusal to sign falsified reports, the dishonorable discharge that followed, 342 lives lost when the habitat ring decompressed, all because corner-cutting corporate practices had compromised the integrity of the emergency bulkheads. He joined the military believing in something greater than himself, only to discover that profit margins mattered more than lives. To his superiors, his testimony before the inquiry board had been damning but ultimately futile. The corporation responsible had powerful allies in Earth's government. The official report blamed maintenance errors and operator negligence. The executives responsible received bonuses. Jasper received a dishonorable discharge and a blacklisting that made employment on Earth impossible. Earth has little to offer someone with my skill set who refuses to work for corporations, he replied evenly. Out here I can be judged by my abilities, not my background. Hermione studied him for a long moment, her head tilted slightly, like a predator assessing potential prey. Something in his answer seemed to satisfy her, though she gave no outward sign of it. Very well, prepare the security detail. We depart at 600 station time. As Jasper turned to leave, she added, and Jasper, the next time you find valuable items unattended in my quarters, you have my permission to secure them properly. He paused at the door, turning back to meet her gaze. With respect, Lady Hermione, I already did. She raised one elegantly arched eyebrow. How so? I called for a security sweep and documented the situation. The items remained in your possession while ensuring that if they went missing, there would be a record of their presence. Hermione's lips curved into a genuine smile this time. Interesting approach. Most would have simply locked them away and potentially interfere with whatever purpose you had in leaving them out. That wasn't my place. Her violet eyes glinted with something that might have been approval. You're more perceptive than your predecessors, Jasper. That's a rare quality in this sector. As he left the office, Jasper couldn't shake the feeling that he had just passed some sort of test. More importantly, he caught a glimpse of something beneath Hermione's imperious exterior, a shrewd intelligence, yes, but also a weariness that spoke of past betrayals. As her new head of security, that information was valuable. Understanding what she feared was the first step to protecting her from it. Back in his Spartan quarters, Jasper reviewed what he knew about the Marhorad system and its notorious trading summit. The system was a political quagmire. 5 inhabited planets with competing interests, dozens of corporate entities vying for resource rights, and a complex web of alliances and rivalries that shifted like the sands of Earth's ancient deserts. The summit itself was ostensibly a peaceful gathering for trade negotiations, but in reality it was a battlefield where the weapons were words and the casualties were measured in market shares and profit margins. Hermione's role in this arena was complex. As head of the Flood Mari's consortium, she controlled access to one of the sector's primary trading hubs. This gave her significant leverage over smaller entities, but also made her a target for rival powers seeking to diminish her influence. The summit would be a dangerous place, not just physically but politically. Jasper spent the next several hours compiling security protocols and briefing the team that would accompany them. 10 guards, all veterans, all personally vetted by him. In the short time since his appointment, he wasn't yet certain of their absolute loyalty to Hermione, but he was confident in their professionalism. For now, that would have to suffice. As he worked, his mind kept returning to the test Hermione had set for him. It revealed something important about her, a deep-seated mistrust that extended even to those in her inner circle. The question was, what had happened to make her so suspicious? And, more importantly, was her suspicion justified? The journey to the Mohorad system should have been routine. Hermione's personal vessel, the Silver Crescent, was equipped with the finest defensive systems credits could buy. Its sleek, elongated hull gleamed like polished mercury against the void. Crystalline viewports along its length, offering breathtaking views of the cosmos. Inside the vessel was a testament to Hermione's wealth and influence. Every surface adorned with rare materials, every system custom to her exacting specifications. Jasper had conducted a thorough security sweep before departure, checking every compartment, verifying the identities of all crew members, and personally inspecting the weapon systems. The Silver Crescent boasted impressive firepower for a diplomatic vessel. 4 rail cannon emplacements, a point defense grid capable of neutralizing incoming projectiles, and electronic warfare suites that could temporarily disable most hostile targeting systems. It was clear that Hermione believed in being prepared for all contingencies. The ship's complement included 30 crew members, primarily of Hermione's species, with a few specialized technicians from other worlds. Security team Jasper had selected comprised 10 guards, a mix of humans and aliens chosen for their combat experience and discretion. Hermione also brought a small diplomatic staff, including her senior advisor, Carrick, whose cold yellow eyes and perpetual slight smile had immediately put Jasper on edge. What no one anticipated was the Ambush waiting in the shadow of Corbin's asteroid belt, the vast field of tumbling rocks had once been a mining colony until a territorial dispute left. It abandoned its remaining infrastructure repurposed by those who preferred to operate outside the law. The official navigation charts marked it as a hazard zone, but its rich mineral deposits still attracted the occasional prospector willing to risk the dangers for the potential rewards. The Silver Crescent's planned route skirted the edge of the belt, maintaining a safe distance while using its gravitation influence to save fuel. It was a standard approach, one taken by thousands of vessels each year. This predictability made it a perfect location for an ambush. The first indication of trouble came when the ship's sensors detected unusual energy signatures dispersed throughout the debris field. By then it was almost too late. 3 unmarked vessels emerged from hiding, their weapon systems already charged and targeting the Crescent's engines. Pirate formation, Jasper announced calmly as alarms blared across the bridge. They're trying to disable us for boarding. The tactical display showed the enemy vessels approach vectors, a classic pincer movement designed to leave the target with no viable escape route. It was a tactic he'd encountered before, both in military service and during his time as a private contractor. Pirates throughout human space used similar approaches. It seems some strategies were universal. Hermione's captain, a nervous Eurydian with too little experience for the position he held, began frantically issuing contradictory orders. The bridge crew, predominantly members of Hermione's blue-skinned species, looked between the captain and Jasper in confusion. Some began implementing the captain's instructions, while others hesitated, sensing the flaws in his approach. Full shields, armed weapon systems, prepare to return fire, the captain shouted, his crest of feathery sensory organs flushing a bright orange. With stress, communications send distress signals on all frequencies. Jasper stepped forward, his posture radiating authority. "Belay those." "Command," he said, his voice cutting through the panic. "Kill our transponder signals, vent oxygen from the lower cargo hold in bursts. Make it look like we've suffered a containment breach." The crew looked to Hermione, who had entered the bridge moments after the alarms began. She stood in the command doorway, her tall figure silhouetted against the red emergency lighting. After a moment's assessment, she nodded once. Confidence in her gesture steadied the crew, and they turned to their stations with renewed focus. "And prepare maneuvering thrusters for my mark," Jasper continued. "We're going to drift like wounded prey, then brake for that gravity's shadow when they move in." Captain's sensory crest flattened against his skull, a sign of submission. "In his species, this is highly irregular," he protested, but with noticeably less conviction. "So is being boarded by pirates," Jasper replied evenly. "I've faced this scenario before. Trust me." For 10 minutes the Silver Crescent played dead, drifting helplessly as the pirate vessels approached. The enemy ships maintained their formation, cautious despite their apparent advantage. On the tactical display, Jasper watched their cautious advance. Pirates were essentially predators. They sought easy targets and avoided unnecessary risks. The trick was to appear vulnerable, then demonstrate you were anything but. A memory surfaced unbidden, his first engagement against asteroid belt raiders as a young lieutenant in Earth's orbital defense force, the patrol ship he'd served on. The EOD's Vigilant had been ambushed a similar fashion while escorting a civilian transport. The ship's commander, a veteran named Reeves, had employed the same tactic they were attempting now. The maneuver had saved their vessel and the civilian ship it protected, though it had cost them damage to their port stabilizers. The Silver Crescent was more maneuverable, but the principle remained the same. "They're moving to surround us," the sensor officer reported, her voice taut with tension. "Boarding pods preparing to launch." Jasper's eyes never left the display, measuring distances, calculating angles. When the lead pirate ship came within boarding range, he gave a single command. Now. The Crescent surged to life, its thrusters firing at maximum capacity. It shot forward, skimming the edge of a massive asteroid and using its gravitational pull to slingshot past the pirate vessels. By the time they could adjust their course, Hermione's ship was already accelerating to jump velocity. The pirates attempted pursuit, but their position had been compromised by their boarding preparations. Two of the vessels managed to fire a few desultory shots, all of which fell short as the distance between them rapidly increased. The third, caught in the gravitational influence of the asteroid, was forced to divert power to its maneuvering thrusters, abandoning the chase entirely. No shots fired, no lives lost. The entire bridge crew exhaled collectively as the pirate vessels receded on the rear sensors, unable to match the Crescent's superior engines. Hermione, who had remained silent throughout the encounter, finally spoke. "Impressive, Jasper. Where did you learn that maneuver?" "I served in Earth's orbital defense force before going private," he said. "Pirates aren't very creative. They use the same tactics across the galaxy." For the first time since he'd entered her employ, Hermione smiled genuinely at him. "It seems I made a wise investment in hiring you." The smile transformed her features, softening the regal aloofness she typically projected. For a brief moment, Jasper glimpsed something beyond the powerful trading magnate, a person capable of warmth, perhaps even vulnerability. But as quickly as it appeared, the moment passed and her customary reserve returned. "We'll reach Merhard in 16 hours, she said, rising from her command chair. "I expect a full security briefing on the summit venue before we arrive." "Of course, lady." Hermione, as she left the bridge, Jasper noticed her senior advisor, Carrick, watching the exchange with an unreadable expression, the man's eyes an unsettling pale yellow against his blue skin, lingered on Jasper for a moment, too long before he followed his mistress from the bridge. Something about that gaze raised Jasper's instincts. It wasn't quite hostility, but something adjacent to it, calculation perhaps, assessment, as if Jasper represented a variable in some complex equation Carrick was solving. It was a look Jasper had seen before in the eyes of officers plotting career advancements at the expense of others. In the corporate executives who had sacrificed 300 lives for a quarterly profit margin. He made a mental note to watch Carrick more closely. In Jasper's experience, those who rose to positions of influence within powerful organizations rarely did so through merit alone. Ambition was a dangerous fuel, and it often burned those who stood in its path. The captain approached him as the bridge returned to normal operations, the crew settling back into their routines with the relief that follows averted danger. That was unorthodox, the Iridian said, his tone carefully neutral but effective. I would be interested to learn more about these tactics you employed. Jasper recognized the overture for what it was, an attempt to save face after being countermanded before his crew. I'd be happy to share what I know, Captain. Perhaps we could review the encounter later as a training exercise for the crew. The captain's sensory crest lifted slightly, indicating cautious approval. Yes, that would be beneficial. As the captain returned to his duties, Jasper remained at the tactical station, reviewing the sensor data from the encounter. The pirate vessels had been well coordinated, their attack precise. This hadn't been an opportunistic raid, but a planned operation. The question was, had they been targeting the Silver Crescent specifically, or had it simply been in the wrong place at the wrong time? Either possibility was concerning. If they had been specifically targeted, it suggested a security leak. Someone had shared their flight plan. If it had been random, then pirate activity in this sector was becoming bolder, more organized. Neither scenario boded well for their return journey. Jasper downloaded the sensor logs for later analysis and left the bridge. He needed to prepare for their arrival at Merherd, and that meant understanding the political landscape as thoroughly as the physical one. The trading summit would be a battlefield of a different sort, but no less dangerous for its lack of conventional weapons. The Merherad Trading Summit was held in a vast crystal dome atop the planet's highest mountain. The structure was an architectural marvel, its transparent panels offering panoramic views of the world below, endless plains of swaying purple grass stretching to distant mountain ranges shrouded in mist. The mountain itself, Mount Arveth, rose over 20,000 ft above the plains, its peak perpetually shrouded in clouds that swirled around the crystal dome like ghostly sentinels. The dome's construction had been a statement of wealth and technological prowess, declaration that the Marhorid system was a power to be reckoned with despite its relative isolation from the major trade routes. Its remote location and breathtaking views made it an ideal neutral ground for the complex negotiations that would unfold within its walls. Representatives from 27-star systems gathered to negotiate resource exchanges, territorial agreements, and transit rights. The delegates were as diverse as the systems they represented. Some humanoid, others with physiology so alien that special environmental accommodations had been constructed to maintain their comfort. Despite these differences, all shared a common purpose: to secure advantages for their people or organizations, preferably at someone else's expense. As one of the quadrant's most influential traders, Hermione commanded respect and fear equal measure. Her arrival caused a stir among the assembled delegates. Jasper, walking 2 paces behind her, noted the varied reactions, difference from some, thinly veiled resentment from others. Politics, he reflected, was the same everywhere, whether on Earth or the far reaches of known space. Power attracted both loyalty and enmity, often in equal measure. The summit's opening ceremony was a carefully choreographed display of diplomatic niceties. Speeches were made, formal greetings exchanged, traditional beverages shared according to the customs of the host world. Throughout it all, Hermione maintained a regal composure, her height indistinctive blue skin making her a focal point. Among the gathered dignitaries, while Hermione conducted business, Jasper observed. He noted which delegates approached her with genuine respect and which masked contempt behind false smiles. He cataloged security weaknesses in the venue and planned escape routes, should they become necessary, and increasingly he found his attention drawn to one individual, Carrick, Hermione's senior advisor. Something about the man's behavior raised Jasper's instincts. The way he disappeared during critical negotiations, the subtle hand gestures he made when certain topics arose, the private communications he received on a secondary device he thought no one noticed. During a recess in the proceedings, Jasper found himself in an observation gallery overlooking the main chamber. From this vantage point he could see Carrick engage in an intense conversation with a representative from the Torsian conglomerate, a rival trading organization with a reputation for aggressive business practices. Two spoke in hushed tones, their body language suggesting a familiarity at odds with their public roles as competitors. When they parted ways, Carrick's expression was one of calculated satisfaction, the look of someone who had just advanced a long planned strategy. Jasper memorized the face of the Torsian representative, making a note to investigate potential connections between them. The summit continued for 3 days, a marathon of formal negotiations interspersed with private meetings where the real decisions were made. Hermione moved through this complex dance with practiced ease, securing advantageous terms for Floodmaris in multiple agreements. To the casual observer she appeared to be at the height of her power and influence, but Jasper, trained to notice details others missed, saw the subtle signs of strain, the slight tightness around her eyes after prolonged sessions, the way her posture, normally perfect, showed hints of fatigue by evening, the increasing frequency with which she consulted with Carrick, sometimes deferring to his judgment on matters she might have previously decided herself. During a rare break in proceedings, Jasper found himself alone with Hermione in her private conference room. She stood by the panoramic window, gazing out at the mountain vista, seemingly lost in thought. The late afternoon light cast her profile in sharp relief against the dramatic landscape beyond. Your advisor, Carrick, how long has he been in your service? He asked, keeping his tone conversational. Hermione looked up from the documents she was reviewing. Gnarly 8 years. He's one of my most trusted lieutenants. Why do you ask? Professional curiosity, Jasper replied. He seems very dedicated to your interests. Hermione studied him with those penetrating violet eyes. You don't trust him? It wasn't a question, but Jasper answered anyway. It's my job not to trust anyone completely where your safety is concerned. She nodded slowly, a wise policy but misplaced in this instance. Carrick has proven his loyalty many times over. Jasper didn't press the issue, but he didn't stop watching either. Years of security work had taught him to trust his instincts, and his instincts were screaming that something was wrong. That evening, a formal reception was held for all summit attendees. The Crystal Dome was transformed for the occasion, its interior bathed in soft multicolored lights that played across the faces of the gathered dignitaries. Music from a dozen worlds filled the air, somehow harmonizing despite the vastly different tonal systems from which they originated, exotic foods and beverages, circulated on floating platters attended by servitors programmed to recognize individual species' dietary requirements and preferences. Hermione moved through the crowd with practiced grace, engaging in the small talk and minor negotiations that often proved as valuable as formal session. Jasper maintained a discreet distance, close enough to intervene if necessary but far enough to avoid inhibiting her interactions. From this position, he observed Carrick once again, meeting with the Torsian representative, this time joined by a third individual, a member of Hermione's own board of directors who had traveled separately to the summit. The three spoke briefly, then separated, moving to different areas of the reception as if their meeting had never occurred. Later that night, unable to sleep, Jasper accessed the vessel's financial records, a breach of protocol, but when his instincts demanded, he worked carefully, ensuring he left no trace of his investigation. What he discovered surprised him. Each month, enormous sums were transferred from Hermione's personal accounts to an organization called Elend's Haven on the Planetarian. The transactions were authorized with the highest security clearance but concealed from public records. Charitable donations weren't unusual for someone of Hermione's wealth, but the secrecy surrounding these transfers was puzzling. Moreover, the amount, nearly 15% of her personal income, was substantial, even by her standards. This wasn't performative philanthropy, it was something she clearly cared deeply about. As he continued his investigation, Jasper discovered something else, a pattern of smaller transactions from Carrick's accounts to various members of Flood Mari's board of directors. The amounts were carefully calibrated to avoid triggering automated fraud detection systems, and the transfers were disguised as legitimate business expenses or consulting fees. But the pattern was unmistakable to someone looking for it. Carrick was buying influence systematically and methodically. The next morning, during Hermione's private meditation time, the only hour of the day she allowed herself to be truly alone, clears throat, Jasper took a calculated risk. "May I ask about Elend's Haven?" he said when she emerged from her chambers. Hermione froze, her normally composed features sharpening with suspicion. "How do you know that name?" "I found the transfers while reviewing security protocols," he admitted. "Regular payments of that size represent a potential vulnerability. I needed to understand their purpose." For a moment he thought she might dismiss him on the spot. Instead, she sank into a chair, suddenly looking weary. The impeccable facade of power and control seemed to crack, revealing something more complicated beneath. "Elend's Haven is an orphanage," she said quietly, "for children who lost parents in industrial accidents, many of them in facilities owned by my consortium." The admission hung in the air between them, unexpected and raw. In that moment, the distance between them, alien and human, employer and employee, seemed to diminish slightly. "I'd like to see it," Jasper said finally. Hermione's gaze snapped to his. "Why?" "Because understanding what matters to you helps me protect you better." She studied him for a long moment, as if trying to decipher some hidden motive in his request. Whatever she saw in his face must have satisfied her, because she nodded slowly. "After the summit concludes, we'll make a detour to Tyrion. before returning to flood Mari's. Remainder of the Merhorid summit passed without incident, though Jasper continued to observe Carrick's suspicious movements. The advisor met secretly with representatives from rival trading organizations twice more, and on the final day, Jasper noticed him accessing Hermione's private communications when he thought no one was watching. Each instance heightened Jasper's concern, but without concrete evidence. He kept his observations to himself. False accusations against someone as trusted as Carrick would only damage his own credibility. As their shuttle departed Merhorid, Jasper found himself standing beside Carrick in the observation lounge, watching the crystal dome recede beneath them. The advisor's yellow eyes reflected the planet's light as he turned to Jasper with that perpetual slight smile. "You've impressed Lady Hermione," Carrick said, his voice carrying the same melodic quality as Hermione's, though lacking her natural authority. "That's quite an achievement for someone so new to her service." "I'm simply doing my job," Jasper replied neutrally. "Indeed, and what exactly do you consider that job to be?" Jasper, protecting her from physical harm or something more comprehensive? The question carried a subtle warning, and Jasper recognized the probe for what it was. "My responsibility is Lady Hermione's security in all its forms." Carrick's smile widened fractionally. "How commendable, but be careful not to overstep. Lady Hermione values initiative, but she expects her staff to understand their place in the hierarchy." "And where is your place in that hierarchy, Carrick?" The advisor's expression hardened momentarily before smoothing back into its practice pleasantness. "I've spent 8 years earning Lady Hermione's trust. I'm her most senior advisor and confidant. Remember that before you consider involving yourself in matters beyond your purview." With that, Carrick departed, leaving Jasper alone with the receding view of Mhor. The exchange had confirmed his suspicions. Carrick viewed him as a threat. The question was whether that threat was to Carrick personally or to whatever plans the advisor had set in motion. 3 days later, they stood on the windswept plains of Tyrion, a world of endless green grasslands and churning ocean. Strong winds carrying the scent of salt and wild herbs buffeted them as they disembarked from the shuttle. The sky overhead was a deep amber streak with high wispy clouds that moved with surprising speed in the planet's powerful air currents. Elend's Haven was a sprawling compound of simple but beautifully designed structures that blended with the natural landscape. The buildings were constructed of local stone and a translucent material that captured and diffused the amber sunlight, creating warm, welcoming spaces within. Gardens flourished between the structures, tended by both adults and children. Children of various species played in the central courtyard, some blue-skinned like Hermione, others with scales or fur, and a few humans. Their laughter carried on the wind, a counterpoint to the solemn purpose of the place. At their arrival, the children paused in their games, regarding the visitors with curious eyes. A small girl with fiery red hair broke away from the group and marched directly up to Hermione. She couldn't have been more than 7 or 8 Earth years, but her bearing was confident, almost defiant. Her green eyes held a wisdom beyond her years as she stared up at the towering blue figure before her. "You're the blue lady who sends the credits," she said bluntly, her small face serious. "My mother died when your Dome collapsed on Sector 7, Jasper. Tensed, ready to intervene, but Hermione knelt to meet the child at eye level. The gesture was startling in its humility, the powerful trading magnate, accustomed to others bowing before her, lowering herself to address a child as an equal. "What's your name?" she asked. Softly, her melodic voice gentler than Jasper had ever heard it. "Marin, I'm sorry about your mother." Marin, the dome should never have failed. The girl's eyes narrowed. Then why did it for the first time since Jasper had known her? Hermione seemed at a loss for words. Her violet eyes clouded with an emotion he couldn't quite identify. Grief, perhaps. Or guilt, I don't know, she finally admitted, but I intend to find out. Mirren held Hermione's gaze for a long moment, as if judging the sincerity of her words. Finally she nodded once, a gesture so adult in its gravity that it seemed out of place on her small frame. "My mother said you were better than they others," she said. "She said you actually cared about people, not just profits." Hermione blinked rapidly, and Jasper realized with a shock that she was fighting back tears. "Your mother was kind to think so," she replied softly. "She worked in environmental systems." Marin continued. "She told me the air scrubbers weren't installed properly, that someone changed the specifications after she signed off on them." The girl's voice wavered slightly. She was going to report it, but then the dome collapsed. Jasper watched Hermione's expression shift from grief to something harder, cold, focused anger. "Do you know who she was going to report this to?" Myron. The girl shook her head. "She just said it went all the way to the top, that someone important was cutting corners to save money." Later, as they toured the facility, the director, a dignified older woman of Hermione's species named Ellen, explained that many of the children had lost parents in a series of structural failures across Hermione's industrial outposts. The pattern was too consistent to be coincidence. "We've had 47 new arrivals in the past standard year alone," Ellen said, her voice heavy with the weight of the statistic, "all from facilities under Flood Mari's management." "Why didn't you bring this to my attention directly?" Hermione asked, her tone carefully neutral. Ellen's answering smile was sad. "Would you have listened, Lady Hermione? Or would my concerns have been filtered through layers of management and advisors before reaching you? How many of those children would still have parents if someone had spoken directly to you about the first dome failure?" The questions hung in the air between them, unanswered but unavoidable. For the first time, Jasper saw doubt in Hermione's eyes, not about her decisions, but about the information upon which those decisions had been based, about the people she had trusted to tell her the truth. That night on the return journey to Flood Mari's, Jasper found Hermione on the observation deck. Staring out at the starfield, she stood alone, silhouetted against the vast expanse of space, her tall figure somehow diminished by the immensity beyond the viewport. "The dome collapses weren't accidents," she said without turning. "Were they?" "I don't believe so," Jasper replied honestly. "The pattern suggests deliberate sabotage. By whom and why? I need access to the original engineering reports, the unredacted versions." She turned to face him, her expression resolute. "You'll have them by morning." The following day, sequestered in Hermione's private study aboard the Silver Crescent, they reviewed the engineering documents. Jasper worked methodically, comparing original specifications with implemented designs, cross-referencing inspection reports, analyzing maintenance logs. Slowly, a disturbing pattern emerged. What the reports revealed was damning. Original safety assessments had been altered, warnings deleted, structural weaknesses introduced deliberately into the final designs, and each altered document bore the same digital signature in its code. Carrick's personal encryption key. He's been undermining you for years, Jasper explained as they reviewed the evidence. These failures weren't meant to be catastrophic, just costly enough to slowly erode confidence in your leadership. But he miscalculated the dome stress factors on Sector 7. People died because of his ambition, Hermione said, her voice deadly quiet. Children lost their parents. It gets worse, Jasper continued, bringing up financial records on the display. These are transfers from Carrick's private accounts to members of your board of directors. Small amounts carefully disguised as investment returns or consulting fees. He's been building a coalition against you. Hermione's hands clenched into fists. For how long? Based on the transaction patterns, at least 3 years, but the planning would have started earlier. Financial traces show he's been gathering support among your board members based on communication patterns. I believe he's planning to move against you directly at the next council meeting 2 days from now. Hermione's hands clenched. I want him exposed publicly with evidence no one can dispute. That's dangerous. It gives him time to act first. I won't operate in shadows, Jasper, not with this. Justice must be seen to be done. For the next 48 hours, they worked tirelessly, gathering evidence, securing testimonies from engineers, tracking financial trails, all while maintaining the appearance of normality. But someone was watching. Twice Jasper detected surveillance devices newly installed in Hermione's quarters. Once he narrowly avoided a maintenance crew that suddenly appeared in a restricted section where they were meeting an informant. The pressure was building toward a confrontation, and Jasper could feel it in the charged atmosphere of the station. Staff spoke in hushed tones, eyes darting nervously when certain names were mentioned. Security personnel moved in larger groups as if anticipating trouble. The usual bustle of commerce continued, but underneath it ran a current of tension, like the pressure before a storm. The night before the council meeting, Jasper was making his final security sweep when movement caught his eye in the dimly lit technical sector. The corridor was supposed to be empty at this hour, all non-essential personnel restricted to their quarters or common areas. He followed cautiously, hand on his blade. Firearms were forbidden on the station, except for the official security force. The attack came from behind, a wire guard whistling through the air toward his neck. Only years of combat training saved him as he ducked and rolled, coming up to face his attacker, a station security officer he recognized as one of Carrick's personal guards. Nothing personal, the man grunted, drawing a serrated combat knife. But Lady Hermione's time is ending. What followed was a brutal, silent struggle. In the narrow corridor, Per was stronger, but the guard knew the territory better, using the confined space to his advantage. A slash opened Jasper's arm from elbow to wrist. He countered by driving his shoulder into his opponent's midsection, slamming him against a junction box. Sparks showered around them as they grappled in the semi-darkness. The guard's knife came up. Again aiming for Jasper's heart, he caught the man's wrist, forcing it back, inch by painful inch, until with a sickening crack the bone gave way. Knife clattered to the floor. The guard howled in pain, the sound echoing down the empty corridor. Who else is involved? Jasper demanded, pinning the man against the wall. How many of the security force are loyal to Carrick? The guard smiled through bloodied teeth. More than enough. The council meets in 6 hours. She won't survive it. Jasper rendered the man unconscious with a precise strike and secured him in a maintenance closet. Then he rushed back to Hermione's quarters, moving through the shadows, avoiding the main corridors where Carrick's people might be watching. His arm throbbed with each heartbeat, blood soaking the improvised bandage he'd wrapped around the wound. "We need to cancel the meeting," he told Hermione after relating what had happened. "Carrick has compromised too much of the security force. It's not safe." She shook her head firmly. "If we cancel, we lose our best chance to expose him completely. The entire board will be present. It's too dangerous." "He's not working alone, I know," she said calmly, "but I trust you to keep me alive. Jasper, you've proven yourself more than capable." The council chamber was an amphitheater of curved metal and glass designed to showcase the station's position at the heart of the trading routes. 12 board members sat in a semicircle facing Hermione's central position. Carrick stood at her right hand, the picture of devoted service. Only the slight tightness around his eyes betrayed any tension. Jasper positioned himself directly behind Hermione, scanning constantly. He had insisted on personally checking the chamber beforehand, discovering and disabling 2 concealed weapons in the process. Still, he felt exposed. Too many variables, too many potential threats. The security personnel stationed around the perimeter were unknowns. Any of them could be loyal to Carrick. Hermione began the meeting with customary formality, reviewing trade figures and upcoming negotiations. Nothing in her demeanor betrayed their knowledge of the planned betrayal. Carrick occasionally leaned in to offer whispered counsel, playing his part to perfection. The board members listened attentively, though Jasper noted 3 who exchanged subtle glances whenever certain topics arose. Halfway through her presentation, Hermione paused, and "Now I must address a matter of grave concern," she said, her voice carrying effortlessly through the chamber. "Evidence has come to light of deliberate sabotage within our organization." The council members stirred uneasily. Carrick's posture stiffened almost imperceptibly. Hermione activated the central display, projecting the damning documents they had assembled. The engineering reports were systematically altered to introduce structural weaknesses in our facilities. The resulting failures have cost lives and billions in damages. As she continued laying out the evidence, Jasper noticed subtle movements among 3 of the council members, hands drifting toward pockets, eyes darting to specific locations around the room. He shifted his position slightly, ready to move. Carrick's face had gone from composed to rigid. "These accusations are outrageous," he interrupted, "and clearly fabricated by someone seeking to undermine your leadership." "Lady Hermione, the evidence speaks for itself," Hermione replied coolly. "Your personal encryption signature is embedded in each altered document." "A security breach, then?" Someone has stolen my credentials. Carrick and LT Unk and GT's voice rose, his composure cracking. This is clearly the attack. Came not from Carrick but from the gallery behind him. A figure rose, arm extending toward Hermione with the unmistakable outline of a projectile weapon. Jasper was moving before the weapon cleared the assailant's cloak. 3 long strides vaulting over the council table, his body positioned to intercept. The shot came just as he collided with the attacker. A searing pain along his ribs as the projectile grazed him instead of finding Hermione's heart. They crashed to the floor together, Jasper twisting to keep the weapon handpinned. The assassin was strong and desperate, fighting with the knowledge that failure meant execution. The blade appeared from nowhere, slashing toward Jasper's throat. He jerked back just enough that it missed his jugular by millimeters. Chaos erupted in the chamber. Security alarms blared. Council members scattered. Through it all, Jasper maintained his focus, gradually gaining control of his opponent. With a final decisive movement, he slammed the assassin's head against the floor, rendering him unconscious. Only then did he look up to find Hermione. She stood exactly where she had been, Clear's throat unflinching amid the pandemonium. Her eyes locked on him. Behind her, Carrick was being restrained by station security, his carefully constructed facade of loyalty finally shattered. Across the chamber, one of the board members who had been exchanging glances earlier drew a concealed weapon. Jasper shouted a warning, but the shot had already been fired. Time seemed to slow as he watched the energy pulse streak toward Hermione, but she wasn't there to receive it. In a display of reflexes he hadn't known she possessed, Hermione dropped and rolled, the shot passing harmlessly overhead. Before the board member could fire again, Hermione had drawn her own ceremonial dagger. Weapon Jasper had assumed was merely decorative and thrown it with stunning precision. The blade embedded itself in the assailant's shoulder, causing him to drop his weapon with a cry of pain. Clear's throat. Their eyes met across the chaos of the chamber, and Jasper saw something new in Hermione's gaze, a fierce determination that matched his own. She was not merely a traitor, not just a political figure. She was a survivor as he was. In that moment of shared danger and resolve, something shifted between them, a deeper understanding taking root. The emergency council session that followed lasted hours. Medical staff treated Jasper's wounds as he stood guard, refusing to leave Hermione's side despite the blood seeping through his bandages. One by one, the evidence was presented. Sabotage, the financial trails, the assassination plot. 3 council members were implicated alongside Carrick, their communications and financial transactions, revealing a complex conspiracy to seize control of the trading consortium, the Dome. Failures were deliberate, Hermione said, her voice hard as she addressed the remaining council members, designed to undermine confidence in my leadership while generating profit through reconstruction contracts awarded to companies controlled by the conspirators. She brought up images of Ellen's Haven, focusing on the faces of the orphan children. These are the true costs of their ambition, not credits or market share, but lives. Parents who will never see their children grow. Children who will never again feel their parents' embrace. The council chambers fell silent, the weight of those words settling over everyone present, even the most hardened business minds among them, seemed affected by the human costs laid bare before them when the proceedings finally concluded. The conspirators were taken into custody to await formal charges under interstellar law. The remaining council members, shaken by the day's events and the extent of the betrayal, unanimously reaffirmed Hermione's leadership. It was well past midnight when they returned to Hermione's quarters. Jasper, exhausted but still vigilant, performed one final security sweep before reporting all clear. "You should see the medical bay properly," Hermione said, noticing his stiff movements and the fresh blood staining his bandages. "After you rest, Lady Hermione," she studied him for a long moment. "You saved my life today. It's my job." "No," she said quietly, "your job was to guard me. What you did, putting yourself between me and death, that was something else entirely." Jasper didn't respond immediately. Finally he said, "On Earth there's an old concept called loyalty, not the kind you buy with credits, but the kind that's earned through actions and respect. And have I earned yours?" Jasper, he met her gaze steadily. "You have." Something passed between them in that moment, an understanding that transcended the boundaries of species and position. They had faced death together and emerged stronger for it. Whatever came next, they would face it as allies, perhaps even as friends. The following week was a flurry of activity as Flood Maris adapted to the revelations. Security protocols were overhauled, personnel loyal to Carrick were identified and removed from sensitive positions. Engineering teams began comprehensive reviews of all existing structures, starting with those most critical to life support. Hermione worked tirelessly, personally reviewing reports that previously would have been filtered through layers of management. Jasper remained at her side, his presence a constant reminder of the dangers they had overcome and those that might still lurk in shadow. 7 days after the failed coup attempt, Hermione addressed the full station assembly. The conspiracy had been laid bare, the conspirators awaiting trial. But rather than focus on the betrayal, she spoke of the future. The dome collapse on Sector 7 was a tragedy that should never have happened, she said, her voice carrying to every corner of the vast gathering space. The fact that it did, that children were orphaned and lives were destroyed, reflects a failure beyond any individual's treachery. It reflects a system that prioritized profit over people. Murmurs rippled through the crowd. Today I am announcing the creation of the Safety Oversight Foundation, independent, fully funded, and with absolute authority to inspect and approve every structure and system within Flood Maris Holdings. Never again will safety be compromised for convenience or cost. She paused, looking out over the assembled crowd. Station personnel, traders, residents, all watching with varying degrees of hope and skepticism. Additionally, a victims' compensation fund will be established to provide for those who have suffered due to our failures, beginning with the children at Ellen's Haven. As applause rose around them, Hermione turned to where Jasper stood at her side. "I'm offering you the directorship of the foundation, full autonomy, resources at your disposal, answerable only to an independent board." Jasper shook his head. "I'm not an administrator, Lady Hermione. I'm a protector." "And who will you protect now?" "You," he said simply, "if you'll have me." As your chief of security, her violet eyes studied his face, searching for something. Whatever she found seemed to satisfy her, because she nodded once, decisively. Good, because I suspect our journey together is just beginning. 2 months later, they returned to Tyrion. The journey was quieter this time, without the weight of suspicion and betrayal hanging over them. As the shuttle descended through Tyrion's atmosphere, Jasper watched Hermione's profile, noting the subtle changes in her since their last visit. There was a new openness to her expression, directness in her gaze that had replaced the calculating reserve she had once maintained. Elend's Haven had expanded. In their absence, new buildings were under construction, funded by Hermione's compensation program. Children still played in the courtyard, but now there were more adults among them, teachers, counselors, medical staff, ensuring their needs were met. Murren was waiting for them, standing straight and solemn in the entrance to the main building. But when she saw Hermione, her composure broke and she ran forward. Without hesitation, Hermione knelt and opened her arms, unfolding the child in an embrace that bridged the gap between species. You came back, Murren said, her voice muffled against Hermione's shoulder. I promised I would, Hermione replied softly, over the child's head. Her eyes met Jasper's. In them he saw gratitude, resolve, and something personal, a connection that had been forged in danger and strengthened in its aftermath. That evening they stood together on a hillside overlooking the haven. The twin moons of Tarion were rising, casting a silvery glow over the landscape. The wind had calmed, carrying now only the faint scent of night, blooming flowers in distant seas. Why did you really leave Earth, Jasper? Hermione asked finally. He considered the question for a long moment. I spent years following orders without questioning their purpose, protecting interests, not people. He paused. Memories of the Jakarta orbital disaster surfacing again, clears throat. The faces of those who had died, the lies told to cover corporate negligence, his own complicity, and remaining silent for too long. Out here, I thought I might find something worth protecting for its own sake. Hermione's violet eyes reflected the moonlight as she turned to him. And have you? Yes, he said. I believe I have. She nodded, a smile playing at the corners of her indigo lips. Then we have both found something rare indeed. She looked back to the haven, where lights glowed warmly in the growing darkness. True loyalty can't be purchased with wealth or power. It must be earned through actions, through justice, through respect, Jasper added quietly. Around them the night deepened, stars emerging one by one in Tarion's amber sky. In the distance, the children of Alien's Haven slept safely, their futures now secure. Tomorrow would bring new challenges. Rogue traders seeking to exploit the recent turmoil, political rivals testing Hermione's restored authority, the ongoing work of reforming a system built on profit rather than compassion. But for now, in this moment of quiet understanding, those challenges could wait. The blue-skin trading magnate and her human protector stood side by side in companionable silence, bound by something stronger than contract or coin. Two individuals from different worlds, united by a shared vision of what might be possible if power were tempered by compassion, if strength were guided by justice. The night wind whispered around them, carrying promise and possibility. And for the first time in longer than he could remember, Jasper felt something he had nearly forgotten. Hope.